our topic today, and I liked what you did with it, the wisdom of compassion. And whilst I've been here, compassion has been, on the number of occasions when it's been broached, it has been like a circular, a round table thing, rather than my giving a talk on it. And so many beautiful things have emerged, like, again, if we were to ask each one, what is compassion? You know, is compassion something that your intellect, that can be reduced to something of the intellect, that you can say this and this and this and this is compassion? At the end of the day, I think compassion is an experience, and it is a feeling, and there are many manifestations of it, and there are times when I think I'm being compassionate, and I'm not, because it's lacking the wisdom. And so compassion with wisdom is a grown-up thing. There's never a wrong time to, again, try and assist or try to help or feel about something, but sometimes it can get one in trouble, and at other times when it has that wisdom in it, then it won't do anything wrong. And so, you know, we could make comparisons or say, well, is compassion and mercy the same thing? Is when you're feeling, what's the word, where's my dictionary? Where is she? She's over there. When you're feeling, like for instance, you're going through something, and I'm empathy, when you have empathy for somebody else. Again, there's a difference. And we'll get to it in a minute, maybe some of how I would see it. But last week I was in Centurion, and we had a roundtable discussion on this topic, and there was a number of people from different religious traditions. And I was particularly struck, if you were to think of compassion in relation to a religion, which one comes to mind first? Would you associate compassion with? Can't hear you. Christianity, okay. Buddhism. I would also opt for Buddhism. There's no religion that is without something. And what interested me, I was just asking some of my sisters, in Hinduism, who is the god or goddess of compassion? There isn't one, is there? No. But you do have in Buddhism, you have Kuan Yin. And so that idea of this aspect, and we know these are all aspects of God, you know, and of course, when it comes to mercy, it can be the feminine form, just like they'll use Mary in some aspects of Christianity, and that goddess has the capacity to hear the cries of the sorrow of others, and not just hear them, but able to do something about it. One of the gentlemen who was with us the other day, in fact there were two from the Buddhist tradition, and what touched me very much was I don't recall what his title is, but part of what he's trying to do is to get compassion on the curriculum of schools. Now, tell me, parents, would you like for your child to be taught about compassion? No answer. Yes, you know, and I remember growing up, and very intense. I grew up in Ireland, and so very intense religious instruction, which I'm forever grateful for. And so we learned the catechism. Anybody here studied the catechism growing up? No Catholics in the room? All right. But it was like a study book. But it didn't really and so there was theology and the rules and the regulations regarding the church and practices and so on. But it didn't really tell you how to handle relationships or day-to-day affairs or whatever else. And is there ever a time when maybe compassion wouldn't be required? I don't think so. I mean, I don't need to know, I don't need to know a list of all the popes that have been in history. It's not going to do very much for me. But that if somebody had taught me, and again, there was definitely teaching about virtues and the difference between sin and virtue and the encouragement for virtue, but not in practical terms. And so I really like this, and it would be great if South Africa were one of the first places to instill that, teaching the children about compassion. How would you teach them? How would you teach them compassion? One of the things, and of course he was telling us that in their scriptures, there are literally thousands of references to compassion. Thousands of references to compassion. And so one thing, and he wasn't speaking about it, doing it from the scriptures, but in such a way, and even like using stories that would spark the children's imagination and show them in practical terms how to maybe implement it. So that was something very nice for me. And in our discussions in the various places that I've been, one of the big questions, is compassion a natural thing that we all have? Or is it something we learn? Or is it something that we can develop? Or do all of the above apply? I think so. I'm inclined to think, knowing the soul as an eternal being, that the original nature of all souls has compassion, because compassion is compassion. Does compassion exist by itself, or is it part of something else? What would you say compassion is part of? Very easy, I think. I would agree with you. My sister, yes. It's part of love. And so the original nature of the soul is love, But compassion is very specific, When do we need compassion? Yes, that's one aspect of it, is when you see somebody else in a hurt or pain or whatever, that you move towards alleviating whatever is that circumstance or situation. So one of the stories that I was sharing, sorry, you have to listen again, was years ago. It was at a BK Center in Miami, and we had a program, and there were some children at the program, and in particular a little boy who was about 3.5 years old and a little girl who was 4. And we had these magic wands, right? Somehow the little girl didn't get a magic wand, and she started crying and making such a racket, and the kind of noise and the difference, somebody can be sad about something and they'll cry quietly, and somebody else with a sense of entitlement. Why didn't I get one? Why didn't you give me one? And so they're usually louder than the other ones, right? Do you have friends like that? So this little girl with her sense of entitlement started, and we're kind of looking, not quite sure what to do. But the little boy, who didn't know her, and his mother never said a word to him, he walked over, he put his arm around her, and he gave her his wand. No words, he could hardly speak. And so that for me was an illustration of that it was something that was inherent. And so do I need to ask, if it's inherent, what happened to it in us? What are the things that prevented, say, everybody else in that room from doing the same thing? You know? So something got in the way between the innocent, pure expression of love in the form of compassion in a little child, and when we became adults, and that we have to think. Because if there's compassion, what is the question? Really, if there's true compassion, there will be no question. You just act. Whereas mostly we'll think, do they deserve it? Should I do it for them? Well, I did it 5 times before. Am I going to do it again? Is that compassion? Don't think so. I don't think so. Not in its natural state. But even if you have assessed the situation, and after some moments you've deemed them worthy of receiving your compassion, even though it's not the purest, wisest, truest form of compassion, do it anyway. Do it anyway. Because sometimes it is the return that you get in that situation that further helps to open something within the heart so that more compassion or under other circumstances can emerge. And another story that I've been telling incessantly is, and I never told it until I came to South Africa. And that was one of our practitioners who found himself on the 64th floor of the Twin Towers on 9/11. And he was an engineer and in an office with 25 people. And okay, long story short, they finally managed to get out. Not the 25 people, 23 of them lost their lives. But the one who was the BK, he was leading others. And of course, every time they got to a landing, because you couldn't use the elevators anymore or lifts, every time they would get to a landing, more and more people would pour out. And so you can imagine, and going down, and then the staircase was no more, and then they had to go down this darkened tunnel with the wires all hanging in the building in the state it was in. Anyway, those of them who were fortunate enough got outside, and they asked this brother, his name was Ramprakash, about being afraid. And he said, I wasn't afraid. And I mean, everybody's astonished. How could you not have been afraid? And he tells a story of where he was when the thing started swaying and how he fell off his seat and so on. And he said, I wasn't afraid. I was too busy helping everybody else. And so where did his compassion come from? I mean, I've known him since he was a young man, and I mean, always very beautiful. But I also know that because of his practice of meditation and all of the things connected with that, service and study and so on, that even, or maybe even without his knowledge, he was growing his compassion. So it's just like you don't know sometimes when you're growing something, because compassion, theoretically it could be needed at any moment, but you're not necessarily using it every day, right? It's for particular circumstances. Some may be more dramatic than others. And so that then was another situation in which, so one is you had it naturally, and the other one, you're actually increasing your propensity for it, your potential for that. And you won't really know it until you need it. But yes, surely everybody has the thought, I want to be a compassionate person, or reverse the thought and say, that's what I would maybe need at certain times from other people. You know, do you all have a story of when someone showed great compassion to you? And one thing is, as our brother here was saying, that compassion when people are downtrodden or lacking or whatever, but that's not the only time. That's one aspect, and in that we're kind of positioning ourselves. I'm the one with, not in a bad sense, but I have the choice, you know, as to whether I'm going to help you or not, and that I see you maybe as less than me at this moment. You know, you don't have something that I do have, and so I'm going to bestow my bounty upon you. I know that's not generally how compassion works, but compassion can often, it can look like compassion, but it may not be compassion.